Dear Ubisoft, hi, Jack here. I may or may not have stolen this intro in order to get a point across in a dramatic fashion, but that aside, we are already 2 months within the year, and as it is customary, rumors are already floating about the internet on what the next Assassin's Creed game is going to be about. But with that comes a more pressing matter, which is, what is the current status of the franchise? Because if I dare be so blunt and ask everybody watching, and Ubisoft as well, if they ever manage to watch this, do you remember when Assassin's Creed was actually great? Yes, I stole his cake, but on a real note though, there was a time when this mere mention of this franchise was synonymous with success and innovative gameplay, as well as awesome storytelling. After all, you know you made it big when your game capitalizes on France's martial art of running away. But I think it is safe to say that ever since the release of Unity and the whole blunder that came out of this, well, that thing, the fandom, as well as Ubisoft themselves, became very split. After a desperate attempt to save face and ultimately a very badly received game, it took you some time to realize that the yearly releases that you were engaged in weren't actually the answer. And then Ubisoft, you decided to do the unthinkable. You took some time to create something new. Wow. The result was nothing else but a wonderful game. Origins, which many were kind of disliking in the beginning because of the shift into more RPG-like mechanics, became a well-beloved game, one that many were looking forward to, especially because we all believed that we were finally back to something in the likes of the character sequels that we've seen with Ezio or Altair. But what did you do, Ubisoft?
Delivering death. Unknown, unseen.
Well, not quite literally, but too damn close. You went nowhere with this. You created a system that just flushed characters over and over, and they became very much just disposable. And I know times they are changing, yada yada, publicly owned companies get aligned with China, but you can't satisfy both parties. The eager and old players, who have been there from the very conception of the franchise, the new ones, as well as your corporate overlords. So in this video, like many before me, I will go on a bit of a rant, try to keep it a bit concise, and go about the things that I believe that Ubisoft may have to change in the upcoming Assassin's Creed. So, let's jump into it. Okay, so I've quite literally reached a point where I do not know what to title each and every section of this video, so let us just go with a gut feeling and address the elephant in the room. Assassin. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached a point in this day and age where we quite literally need to ask, or even beg Ubisoft on our knees to be able to play as an assassin in an AC game. We've reached the bottom of the barrel. Look, I may come off as if I'm very much complaining about this, and because I frankly am, but I really love these games. They are beautiful in each their own merits, and I really want them to succeed, which is why I care so deeply. Even the quote-unquote reboots. Well, I did hate Odyssey with a passion because it had fuck all to do with ass-assing, but in terms of Valhalla and Origins, and especially with the Hidden Ones DLC, I was amazed. It was absolutely breathtaking to see the writing that went into characterizing Aya or Amunet and the relationship with Bayek, two founders of the Creed, experiencing how they had to set their loves aside in order to fight for the greater good, the inner conflict that went into the Creed itself. And it was all handled with stellar voice acting, amazing motion capture, and just a wonderful story with amazing references. It really took you back to the days of Assassin's Creed 2 and Revelation, where both of the characters were originally mentioned. When it comes to Valhalla, something similar has been done with the Order of the Ancients, which will later on become the Templars. The introduction of the Father of Understanding and what that was all about. How they as an order themselves had inner conflicts with terms of religion and politics. But when it came to the assassins, of course the inclusion of Basim and Haytham were great, but more importantly was the assassins' bureaus, spread throughout the entirety of England, were amazing stories about how the assassin had a great influence on the entirety of Europe, Africa and even Asia. We got amazing callbacks to the pros and cons of the bleeding effect, some messages from Desmond and... Oh, you didn't find these? Oh yeah, I forgot, that's because they quite literally are hidden. Not to be found by anybody unless you actually are digging through the mud to find them. For you see, in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Ubisoft decided to hide their bureau, which quite makes sense, but you will not find them unless you quite literally are looking all the time for finding Assassin's gear and what all messages that will help you expand on your knowledge of the lore. Then again, I am not saying that anybody needs to be a lore buff or a history buff for that sake, but if Ubisoft quite literally wants to focus only on allowing people to grind, then they should make another game. Phoenix Rising, ladies and gentlemen, that exists. Because what this creates is an even more glaring issue, and that is the critique. And by critique, I mean the process of reviewing these games. Because you have what I like to call the IGN effect, where after a period of 15 to, let us be generous here, 30 hours of gameplay, the reviewers will give you the definitive, not first impression, but review of the game. And this tends to be problematic, because what a lot of early reviewers are supposed to tell you is whether or not the game is worth playing. Some people are found in a situation where they struggle to figure out if they can afford a game at a given season, or if they should be better off buying something else. And this is not an issue that is just singling out the big YouTubers. Because yes, they are definitely at fault. You will see some of them play hundreds of hours in an MMORPG, and then feeling burnt after playing 60 hours of AC Valhalla. Not everybody is going to do a walk in the walks type of video like they do at ACG. By the way, I love that channel, definitely check that out, where they go into all the meticulous details of things that you might not even care about. And this is a big issue that the RPG reboots have faced. Sure, Valhalla did fix a lot of the questing and leveling issues that the previous games had. However, this entry forced you to have to conquer the entirety of England before you got the real day ending. That's unforgivable, and this is not something that somebody should feel forced to do. Because while the first 15 or so hours of Valhalla are quite enjoyable as you are introduced to Sigurd, a bit of Norway, the customs of Vikings, then set sail for England and explore a bit of the land, there comes a point where you start realizing that a lot of things that you are suddenly doing are extremely, and I do mean extremely, repetitive. And it really doesn't help that only a couple, if you exclude the Vinland Saga arc, are enjoyable. The rest is just fluff and adds nothing to the story at all. And this to say, are not very impactful as standalone arcs. And let's also talk a little bit about the whole Sigurd situation. Because your brother gets kidnapped by a group of religious zealots hell-bent on world domination who believe in some ancient being with supernatural powers, and evil never seems to catch up on that. Like, how is he the reincarnation of the god who hanged himself for the wisdom of the world and is so dumb? Oh my god, issues, let's save that for later. And what do? You get to shag his wife, sail halfway across the world, and suddenly remember, oh yeah, I have a brother that I need to help. I mean, I am so confused. What I'm trying to say is that there clearly is a lot that the creative team is trying to tell. Unfortunately, a lot of it is very unstructured, and a lot of plot holes never gets concluded. The main story itself just seems to stop and not truly end. Of course, one could fault that to be part of Ubisoft's new game service. After all, their earnings call to show that the RPG thing does work wonders and earns them a lot of money, so they're going to stay with that. But that shouldn't negate their abilities to create good content, where your choices actually impact what your character is supposed to do. Which brings us to the next part, the characters. I said it earlier and I said it again. Please let us play as an assassin, somebody who cares about the creed. We could even play as a Templar like we did with Shay Colmac in Assassin's Creed Rogue. That we get to play as man or woman, that doesn't really matter. You can even still keep the dialogue choices, but actually make them meaningful. It is frankly mind-blowing that a game like Mass Effect 1, and dare I say even the worst of them 3, yes I know people are going to come at me for this, but I really hated the ending, are doing it a lot better than a game in 2020. I frankly cannot be the only one who gets frustrated about characters who keep on throwing their hands in the air like they just don't care when they're talking to me.
They meant anything to a traitor like you. Who told you of this?
While AI-generated reactions or facial expressions from the characters are not the worst thing in the world, they only come off as passable. And this is frankly surprising because this is the same engine that has been used in games like Syndicate or Unity. Which were good, of course, because, well, dialogue and interactions with characters actually included motion capture. There was put some work into that, into making us appreciating what the actors were actually doing. If we set aside the Isu stuff, there's but one scene in this game that really left me in awe. You know I'm talking about the campfire scene.
Universal, we believe that.
So there's nowhere you call home?
No place I call home. No.
Red.
For me, home is family. But I have no family.
No one? Not even Hytham?
Parents, brothers, all dead.
I lost my parents when I was 9 winters alone. Without Sigurd, I would have...
Why weren't we allowed to see more of this in-game? Hells, I raise you this one.
Look at you!
Oh no, the abomination. No, push that away. I'm talking about Origins. We all got to see how Bayek evolves from being a simple magi to becoming a hidden one, what we then will consider an assassin now. The emotions conveyed through his expressions of happiness and sadness, the gravitas in his voice whenever he needed to be commanding or compassionate. These are things that any individual is looking for in any type of entertainment medium. And especially with video games where you need to have your player get immersed in the world. It is frankly incredible that in a story where I got to meet hundreds or so characters, only the Boy King and Chilbert and, well, perhaps also a fellow Vikinger were the only characters with whom I got to sympathize for. And these were all the good guys. When it came to the baddies, none of them were really ever likable. I felt very much like Shay in AC Rogue, where the only thing that you had to do was to just go and kill a target and you never felt any remorse. In the case that one may think that I'm simping too much on the good old AC1, 2 or Brotherhood, let's take the example of the adventures of Peaceport or the Kenway lines. There was a reason as to why it was impactful to carry on the Assassin's works. Most of the characters that you are going after were people that you had known. Some did you have to carry personal vendettas for, but in the case of, for example, Charles Lee, was somebody that you got to play and become very good friends with as Haytham. You got to see his dedication in the Templars order, but also the dark side of his that just wanted to eradicate an entire people. Likewise with Edward or Arno, who while fighting for a common cause at some point got to see their own mentors betray them. And in Valhalla I'm supposed to just have a beer with some maniac and suddenly we're best friend, and I should be shocked by the fact that he wants me to kill him. Hell no! There is just a huge inconsistency in the way that these characters are handled, the way that they act or react to the actions of you, the character, or the world that surrounds them. And Ubisoft should really just stop focusing on producing a multitude of games just to earn money and perfecting what could be better. This then brings us to gameplay, which should really just be the center point of the entire thing, but as a whole package is really difficult to describe Assassin's Creed. But let's talk about certain mechanics. The combat. It is bad, and I will almost say terrible, but I do find some redeeming factors in it. But collecting weapons and armor sets doesn't make an RPG. When you're literally walking around with Thor's hammer or Gungnir, like the fact that people don't even react to the weapon that you're owning in comparison with such things like in, I believe it was in Revelation, or was it in Brotherhood, where if you carried around the Apple of Eden, people would be scared of you. Like, those small details. Even if such things as utilizing the stealth, or lack thereof, which I actually found somewhat enjoyable because of the level design this time around. There was a lot more verticality involved in the way that the guards were reacting, where they were placed, which allowed you to have more stealthy kills. It really gets diminished and pushed aside when your character becomes godlike, and all that you care about is just to recreate a discount genocide simulator. Like, at times I felt like I was playing a newer version of Dynasty Warriors, just with a limitation of combos, which, I don't know, the combat in AC is rarely something that is perfected. I would really much like to see something similar to what was implemented in the Syndicate, if they want to focus on the aspect of combos and collecting new weapons. But I also like to see the combat be more fluid, in comparison to what is objectively the best Assassin's Creed game out there, Unity. It had the most fluid parkour, the biggest emphasis on stealth, and overall so damn cool. Like, look at this. Tell me you don't find this awesome. And it had a dedicated online mode where you could complete missions with your friends. That is the type of side content that they should be focusing on. Odyssey and even Malaka's Creed were good enough to put on some additional content a few months after their release. For Origins, you already had a couple of DLC plus a Game Plus mode. Odyssey added the transmog, some extra quests, more beasts that you had to go and slay. And that's so lovely Game Plus mode as well. And there's no way that the excuse of a pandemic can be utilized in these cases. Because within the time frame that those were released, you could have managed to do that, instead of focusing on creating things for microtransactions. I know, I'm sounding like a broken record right now, and I apologize for this. But back to the gameplay. As I was saying, Unity was objectively the best AC game out there. You had the opportunity to utilize social stealth. The parkour mechanics were very, very fluid, but while it might have taken a bit of getting used to, once you actually mastered it, the assassination that you could make were almost like a choreography. Do similar features exist in Valhalla? Yes, but they've been bastardized to a degree that is almost laughable. Social stealth is there, but it's pretty useless. And every single time that I actually attempted to walk, it's like I'm going at a turtle's pace. Like, here's something very provocative. The best Assassin's Creed game that I've played in recent time has been Hitman. Let that sink in. Since Ubisoft decided to completely eradicate the identity of Assassin's Creed and opted to copy The Witcher 3, which they fail on doing, they completely forgot what makes an RPG. And that is immersion. I should be able to see the consequences of my actions take place in the world, or at least in my surroundings. These consequences don't need to have a direct effect on the main narrative, but still should have some impact. How come it be that only 2 members do mention after the fact that I just murdered the fellow settlers of theirs? How come this furry be this glad to see me after he so happily wanted to kill me some time ago? Playing The Witcher 3, a game that this franchise so blatantly wants to copy, had me constantly returning to the people that I helped in the past just to see whether or not their lives have gotten better or worse. You will find none of that in this game. Should I help one family member or the other? It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day you are still going to be burning their source of income, and both are going to suffer from the results. So when I hear the word RPG, I go and expect something more, but it often, way too often, feels as if a lot of the side content is just an afterthought. This is why I believe that AC as an RPG for the future might benefit from having a smaller map, one that is packed full of content and lived in, and not just there. Like traveling from point A to B should feel like having an adventure. Which is why I could somewhat excuse the likes of Odyssey, which copied a bit from Black Flag. When you were sailing throughout the entirety of Greece, you will encounter enemies which oppose some sort of challenge. In Valhalla, the occasional spooky tree just doesn't do it for me. And unless you were sailing in your longship where one of your random NPC would be pointing at a Christian village in desperate need of pillaging, there would be nothing. And the mercenary system was also involved in that aspect, which is a feature that I overall don't have any issues with, if only the rewards that you got from them actually served the purpose, besides just being collectible for Basim to add to the walls. I originally wanted to mention something about the issue, but I think that one is more subjective. I feel like at the end of this game it all tied it well together and did refer to some very good things in previous games, and I quite enjoyed it. However, the direction with which they're going with the issue is not something that I'm particularly fond of. They were originally precursor beings that humans did confuse with the gods in their respective religions. But now that you realize that Odin and the entire gaggle of gods are in fact Isu, it changes the narrative. It's not like when you hear that reference that Folke did about Jesus Christ, that if you understand the Isu you automatically also understand the Bible. The gist is that the original thing was science fiction, and it has now polymorphed into straight up fantasy. And I'm not saying that it definitely is bad, because I did enjoy what was displayed in Valhalla. But if the future undertakings are going to be involving such things as India, it's going to be a massive undertaking and, well, yeah, needlessly convoluted. But that is just my opinion. But lastly, we have the conference call, what I mentioned earlier, because there are few things that the entirety of mankind is waiting for. World peace, an end to world hunger, Half-Life 3, a non-buggy Cyberpunk 2077. Given that Valhalla plays so much on Christianity, I will refer to Romans 8:19, saying that the entire creation is waiting eagerly for the return of God. But in the gaming world, only one God exists, and it is money, and he is aided by his all-powerful angel, Michael Transactions. And this is unfortunately what a lot of the games are built around nowadays. It's no longer about focusing on the creative aspect that your game designers have made, but more about the business and how you can earn the most money doing the least. That is most likely not going to change, but I mean, DC fans did get a Snyder Cut, and there's supposedly going to be a Mortal Kombat trailer dropping next week, so I can dream. But guys, this was essentially the list of the few things and, dare I say, complaints that I had about Assassin's Creed Valhalla and what I believe that Ubisoft should be changing for upcoming games. But I hope you like this bit of change in content. I like to dive a little bit into some gaming stuff whenever I have the chance and time, and hopefully you want to see more of this, and you can do that by subscribing to the channel if you're new and giving the video a like. It helps it quite a lot. So thanks once again for watching, and have a nice weekend.